Live from ZTN Studios in Harare, Zimbabwe. Welcome to the National Purse, a program brought to you by Zim Papers TV network ZTN and our partners, Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, ZimCOD. Good afternoon, I'm Andy Hodges. Our discussion this afternoon, a very important discussion, unpacking the 2021 budget strategy paper. Now, of course, please feel free to share your views via our Facebook platform at Zim Papers TV network or via our Twitter handle at ZTN News. On the 16th of October 2020, the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Professor Ntuli Ngube, launched the 2021 Budget Strategy Paper, or BSP, under the theme, Building Resilience and Economic Recovery Post-COVID-19. The Budget Strategy Paper is a document that guides the manner in which the 2021 national budget would be structured. The BSP further focuses on strengthening the economy to withstand any potential climatic shocks, such as droughts, cyclones, floods, pests, and furthermore, macroeconomic shocks. This year's BSP marks the transition from the Transitional Stabilization Program, or TSP, which is coming to an end in December 2020, paving way for the National Development Strategy 2021 to 2025 as the country moves towards attaining a middle-income economy by 2030. According to Zimbabwe's Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, the 2021 Budget Strategy Paper, BSP, constitutes a valuable tool meant to guide collective discussions and sharing of ideas on national priority policies, programs and projects for the forthcoming 2021 national budget. Today, to help us in unpacking the 2021 Budget Strategy Paper are Leonard Mandishara, Executive Director, National Association of Non-Governmental Organizations, or NANGO, Dr. David Makwerere, he's an academic, and we will be joined later in the show by Sakile Sifalani Ngoma, Executive Director, Women in Politics Support Unit, WIPSU. Gentlemen, welcome to the National Purse.
Thank you, Andy.
Now, in our first segment, we ask, what were the key highlights in the BSP? Are the projections as given by the Ministry of Finance attainable? And what are the important objectives articulated in the BSP, which will be translated into the national budget? Leonard, I always like starting with the basics now. Briefly, can you explain the 2021 Budget Strategy Paper? What is it and its importance in the pre-budget process? And in your opinion, maybe just highlight some of the key highlights that you believe are contained in the document.
Okay, thank you so much, Andy, and also good afternoon to the viewers. You have asked a very important question, which for me I think is very important because the national budget is developed or drafted specifically for the general public. So our quest as civil society organizations, where we come from as NANGO, we feel that the budget is supposed to address the needs of the public. So in that regard, the budget strategy paper, which in other quarters is referred as the pre-budget statement, it serves the purpose now of highlighting, the thinking, the framework, and the philosophy of the fiscal authority, that is the Ministry of Finance, which they are going to be taking as they draft and develop the forthcoming national budget or the executive budget. So it lays the foundation for the framework of the budget. Why is it important? It's important in the fact that this is the document that can be used now by the different stakeholders when they want to engage the Ministry of Finance during the process of drafting the budget itself. Because now the framework which the budget is being developed, now the vision that the ministry is setting, now the priorities that are being set by the ministry. So whatever budget aspirations that one would want to engage the ministry on, they will be going to engage them within that framework. Again, what is also important, if the ministry in the budget strategy paper has met some of the peculiar and unique needs of the general public, the general public now will be able now to engage the Ministry of Finance to say, these are the key priorities that we feel are supposed to be contained and prioritized in the budget, but we saw that in the budget strategy paper, they were not there.
I think we're going to get into that, but you're right, David. This is about buy-in, isn't it? I mean, if everyone buys into a document, they understand the process to get there, they understand the achievements wanted to be achieved, so to speak, by the strategies, then they can buy in properly. But I want to ask you this, David. Do you think that why do you think that the government believes that the BSP, as stated by Zimbabwe's Ministry of Finance, and I quote, particularly important at this juncture for strengthening policies and other interventions?
Thank you very much, Andy. So, yes, important in many ways, particularly given the transitional dynamics and the transitional context that we find ourselves in. It is a fact, agreed or contested, that our social contract is quite constrained. And this is one opportunity that brings, many stakeholders to agree on a very critical issue in terms of allocation of national resources. So this is a consensus building platform, an opportunity to consult widely, and an opportunity, to build an understanding in terms of the direction that the country is taking, seeing that the transitional stabilization program is coming to an end in December.
Leonard, is it important that, and again I'll quote the BSP, it states, Zimbabwe redefines the country's priorities and focus, paying particular attention to reducing poverty, promoting equitable shared growth, and resuscitating distressed sectors of the economy, strengthening social services, delivery systems, and establishing resilient and inclusive safety nets to protect the most vulnerable members of our society. That's important, isn't it?
Yeah, it is very important for the budget to really do what you have said, because it's a tool that we believe that is supposed to then act as a redistributive mechanism to redistribute wealth and income from those they have and to those they have not, so that at least we bridge the gap of the rich and the poor, so that at least we minimize inequalities. And for that to happen, it means the budget, as informed by the pre-budget statement or the budget strategy paper, should then lay the foundation of what is called a pro-poor or pro-people budget, which then specifically addresses the unique and peculiar needs of the vulnerable in the societies and those who are languishing in abject poverty.
David, as Zimbabwe attempts to climb out of the COVID-19 shocks and, of course, the previous economic instability, social safety nets for the most vulnerable citizens amongst us will need to be maintained. I mean, one way that government has said they are doing this, which they are, is through the Fumvudza in Swasa concept, which is aimed at ensuring food security at household level. That's targeting 1.8 million households to grow maize and traditional grains. I mean, do you think, in your opinion, that as well as cash payments, which are currently ongoing, this is an effective way of achieving this goal of at least protecting the most vulnerable?
Thank you. So in the interim, and I would say that this could work, but then we're also looking at the bigger picture to say for how long. So it can work now as an interim measure where we can certainly adjust and begin to be food secure if people are going to produce. But this is also heavily dependent on the rains, because this is pretty much a rain-fed kind of model for many, and subsistence farming, as it were. So yes, as an interim measure to get out of the woods, we can rely on it. But the government should start looking beyond this kind of arrangement to begin to look at how to address issues of abject poverty and to begin to initiate programs that can be sustainable.
I mean, we need to move people out of poverty, our citizens. I mean, that's the bottom line. Sometimes doing these sort of projects, which are commendable, and of course they do work in the short term, we need strategies that brings them out, Leonard, that starts moving them from say abject poverty or vulnerable to more mainstream and being able to survive on their own jobs and so forth. Any comment on that?
Yeah, because I think, like what you have said, if we develop very good, programs or plans, but if they are not merged now with the national pace, it means those plans are not going to be implemented, which then lays down the pathways of then lifting people from poverty, to modest life. So I think marrying the two, the national development planning and also the budget, to work, hand in glove. That is the biggest tool to make sure that we defeat this challenge of poverty.
Leonard, we have a couple of minutes to break, but I just want to ask you both one more question before we go to the breather. My question to you, Leonard, is that obviously the BSP, and by definition the national budget, is defined by assumptions. The finance ministry has to make assumptions, and the one assumption which of course is there in the document is the growth rate for 2021 of 7.4%. That's against a negative 4.5% of 2020. And also, if you compare to sub-Saharan Africa, the growth rate for 2021 is projected at 3.1%. So we're at 7.4%, sub-Saharan are at 3.1%. Critics have said this is just not achievable. Your comment?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a very good question, which needs to be also approached in different dimensions, because there are quite a number of issues that we can look at. But what is important in our case now are the assumptions that the Ministry of Finance are working under, which then defines whether they are able to attain the 7.4 economic growth rate in the next 2021 budget. But now, rewinding backwards, you see that a year ago, our estimated growth rate was negative 6%, and this year, our estimated growth rate is also negative 4.5. Now, to say we are going to move from negative growth rate to positive growth rate, and also with a huge margin, I think that's where the biggest problem is, because looking at the fundamentals that then constrain our growth as a country, we have not yet addressed those key bottlenecks or inhibitors. For instance, when you look at the issue of agriculture, yes, our economy is heavily dependent on, its growth is dependent on agriculture, mining, and the service sector's contribution is also not huge. But how safe are we in terms of the robustness of our agriculture?
All right, I'll have to please keep your thoughts. David, I will come to you with a question. In fact, I must say, though, that the reason why the minister believes 7.4% growth is achievable is he calls what is called coming off a low base. That, of course, is a discussion for another day. We'll have to take a breather. You're watching The National Pulse. Our discussion this afternoon, unpacking the 2021 budget strategy paper. This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network, ZTN, and our partners, the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, ZIMCOD. In our next segment, we ask, was the Zimbabwean government successful in living within its means, and is this sustainable? Has the government been effective in improving quality of life in the areas of education, health, and social protection? And was the BSP document accessible to citizens? Don't go away. The National Pulse will be right back. Welcome back. You're watching The National Pulse. Our discussion this afternoon, unpacking the 2021 budget strategy paper. This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network, ZTN, and our partners, the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, ZIMCOD. Now, please keep your comments and views coming through on our social media pages, Facebook page, Zim Papers TV Network, and via our Twitter handle @ZTN News. Now, we were expecting Sakile Sifalani Ngoma, Executive Director, Women in Politics Support Unit, or WIPSU. Unfortunately, she is unable to make it for no fault of her own, so we will obviously try and get it on future programming. Now, David, I want to ask you a question which is important, because I think the mantra we all know, production, production, production. And one area, of course, that's covered in the BSP is the growth of some sectors. The ministry is forecasting growth, for example, in agriculture and mining of 11% in 2021, tourism 6.8%, electricity 10% among some of the major sectors. How critical is it for our nation and economy to increase productivity in sectors? And more importantly, job creation, David?
Very critical, if you ask me, Andy. Critical in many ways. One is that already you have hinted on issues of job creation. Is one area where you will notice that even in the strategy paper, that it's a critical area that we need to work on. And in other, publications and researches, you note issues of underemployment, unemployment, all that affecting the stability, macroeconomic stability, and even the socioeconomic stability of things. So production, yes, very critical. But also a critical question should be asked in terms of how inclusive the processes of production then become. And not only inclusive in terms of the socio-economic characteristics of our people, but also inclusive in terms of all sectors. I have seen a deliberate focus on mining, on electricity, which is fine. But I will tell you, Andy, that sport, for example, is one big business elsewhere in Africa and across the world. But it would appear our policymakers, they have not attached the importance that it deserves in terms of also, that's production in a way. And we need that.
I will say though that in actually the notes in terms of the priorities in terms of the budget, one of it is, I believe, human capital development and well-being, of course, and in the NDS, which is the 5-year document, youth, sport, and culture is there. But you're right. I mean, sport, of course, coming from my background in sport, I appreciate the amount of money that can be made in sport. But we'll leave that there because we don't want to talk about football teams here.
Yes,
but
yes.
Leonard, one area which the government stresses that they have been successful in is the issue of living within its means. Government says it's living within its means, and this entailed, obviously, in embracing a wide range of expenditure containment and revenue-enhancing measures, and they say from 2018 to date. And look at the numbers. Current account surplus projected for 2020 of $1.2 billion US from a deficit of $1.4 billion US in 2018, coupled with budget surpluses and a relatively balanced budget. This is coming from the Ministry of Finance. Is it correct, in your opinion, to say that government is living within its means currently?
Well, I think it's an interesting question, Andy, because from where we stand as Nango, and also representing civil society organizations, we appreciate, the targets that can be set in terms of numerical figures, where the government can say we want to attain a budget, surplus of this tune. We also want to target a current account, surplus to this tune. But our concern is, do we see that translating into well-being of the general citizenry of Zimbabwe? So that's where it's mainly supposed to be important, because the national budget, being a public document, its outcomes are supposed to be seen and felt by the citizens. If the citizens do not see the surpluses in their houses, if the citizens do not see surpluses in the hospitals, if the citizens do not experience surpluses even at schools, it means these targets cease to mean anything to the people. So for me, what I think, yes, we may have a surplus, but is that surplus translating into transforming the lives of the general citizen in Zimbabwe?
David, there's some issues there that Leonard has raised, but I also want to talk about the correlation between inflation and money supply growth. Inflation rate is projected at 134%. This is coming from the BSP document, and of course the ministry says that the Reserve Bank has curtailed money supply growth effectively, and it appears the numbers that are coming out shows that. So the question is that, as we said, this is all projections. Are these numbers achievable? 134% projected inflation rate. I mean, we're coming from a 600, 700% inflation environment. So that means that things have to work in this budget for us to get back to resilience or building resilience after COVID-19?
Yeah, pretty much achievable, but dependent on a lot of factors. First is the extent to which, the government can win the trust of critical stakeholders, in this case business and other players, particularly where we talk of foreign direct investment, which they've been chasing for so long. And perhaps, yes, results are starting to trickle in. The mining sector doing well in terms of attracting actors from outside. But also, more importantly, from within now, we also talk of issues of accountability, transparency, and inclusivity.
Accountability as well.
Yes, because these have been issues that have been of concern with the previous administration, and we certainly hope that if the commitment and the political will is there, this could be in a way realistic.
And I want to link that as well, David, to something else. One major criticism of the government's budget, of course, was the high amount spent on employment costs. I mean, look at the numbers. 2009, 78.3% of the budget was spent on employment costs, rising from 48%, from 48% in 2009, 78.3% in 2017, apologies, before receding to 61% in 2018, and it's expected that it will be 42% by the end of 2020. So the government is saying that they have started to get employment costs under control. However, they do want levels of 30%. That's the target. But there are wage pressures coming through. I mean, we've seen teachers demanding more salary, civil servant wage pressures coming through, nurses, doctors, etc. I mean, how sustainable is that 42% or even target of 30%? Do you think government will be able to manage these costs effectively?
Well, that's quite contested and also dependent on the extent to which the government is able to collect revenue. But let me also try and bring in the character of the state and what has happened, because it is a fact that our civil servants, for us to produce at an optimal level, we need a motivated workforce. And if we don't have that, this will also undermine the objectives of our national budget. So it's achievable if revenue is collected, but I think we also need to be clear in terms of the character of the state that we have. I think ideally what we present theoretically is that we are a developmentalist welfare state, kind of, which should be concerned with the welfare of its citizens, including the civil service. But what has happened during the era of the Transitional Stabilization Program, I think it has left most of the civil servants almost destitute, as it were. So the pressure will always be there, but one key to addressing that is to also ensure that revenue is collected and revenue leakages are limited.
Well, there are different models, of course, increasing productivity, putting in place certain contracts, productive contracts for employees and so forth. But you're right, obviously it's one area government will have to look in the budget in terms of increasing wages. Leonard, I want you to articulate a bit more on what you started talking about before David started speaking then. It's about the Zimbabwe government has said it's made a number of investments that improve the quality of life in the areas of education, health and social protection. This is again coming from the BSP document. So the question is, of course, Leonard, is to what extent is it responding to citizens' needs and aspirations, especially in the context of COVID-19?
Yeah, like what I said, you see that if you read the budget strategy paper, it has itemized some of the key infrastructure development programs that were constructed by the government within the period of the TSP. Some roads have been constructed, some clinics have been constructed, and also schools have been constructed. But from our engagement, like we do community engagement, programs, you find that most of the issues or the grievances that the communities had, even prior the pronouncement of the TSP, are the same issues that they continue to put forward to say government is supposed to address these issues. Like for example, when you're talking about health, the state of the infrastructure, if you go to the hard-to-reach areas, is deplorable. And also personnel to then attend to those people who would want to go and access health services, they are also not there or they are not motivated. So those are the issues. Yes, the infrastructure may be there, but that on its own doesn't guarantee access to basic health services. Again, if you look even at education, schools have been built, but are the children accessing, the basic education service that they are supposed to be getting?
Textbooks, computers, even
electricity. You name a lot of things. So I think there's a disconnection now between what the government reports to be achievements and what the general citizen feel to be achievements of some of the national budgets or the plans and programs that are enunciated by the government.
All right, David, in the open budget survey carried out by ZimCod, the report reveals that 1.7% of the respondents indicated that they had access to the pre-budget paper published by the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development before participating in the budget consultation. Let me repeat that, 1.7%. Okay, so how do you think that the document could have been, and even now I suppose, can be made accessible and palatable to ordinary citizens?
Yeah, I totally agree that 1.7 is inconsequential. We need a significant number. We need buy-in from critical stakeholders. I think it could be a deliberate effort on the part of the ministry just to ensure that the mediums of communication are broadened. In this era of digital technology, I believe it's very easy to reach out to significant constituencies. You talk of the youth. I think they are the most active on this platform. But we also have many platforms, even religious gatherings. That's where you find the people, the ordinary people. Even academic institutions, that's where you find the academics and students in different programs with different but important perspectives to the whole process, to feed into the process. And also translating it, having a disability kind of strategy. How do we reach out to the hard to hear? How do we reach out to the visually impaired? Because they also need to input their ideas into the whole process.
No, I think you're, Leonard, thank you. I think you're right. In future, this is the kind of strategies that the government needs to put in place to get it as widely spread as possible. Because if you're saying that you want an open consultative process, then make it so.
Yeah, just also to add from what you were saying, I think we need also to move towards a process which other countries are also doing now, to develop what is called now a citizen-friendly budget document. Of all the budget documents that the ministry produces, like in this case, when they launch the budget strategy paper, alongside the technocratic budget strategy paper was supposed also to be launched a citizens budget strategy paper, so that the citizens will be able to interact with the budget strategy
and
paper.
Understand it.
Understand it.
And we have to take a breather now. You're watching the National Pulse, our discussion this afternoon, unpacking the 2021 budget strategy paper. This broadcast is brought to you by ZimPaper's TV network, ZTN, and our partners, the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, ZimCod. In our final segment, we again ask, what will guide the 2021 national budget, and how will it feed into the National Development Strategy, or NDS-1, which runs from 2021 to 2025? How important is it for Zimbabwe to get its foreign debt management plan into action? And what direction is the BSP taking Zimbabwe? Don't go away. The National Pulse will be right back.
Life will never be the same again.
Absolutely. No. How do you tell someone in Bari or in Soweto that they should exercise social distancing?
Every single one of us, barring a few, are praying more.
What is the health economic cost of what we are trying to achieve?
I don't know whether his chairman knows he runs at about 9 in the morning.
Yeah, I've just got the symptoms, so I just called the doctor and and then he just advised me to have to stay at home, eh?
Welcome back to the National Pulse, our discussion this afternoon, unpacking the 2021 budget strategy paper. This broadcast is brought to you by ZimPaper's TV network, ZTN, and our partners, the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, ZimCod. Then the 2021 national budget will be guided by the National Development Strategy, or NDS-1, as I said, which runs from 2021 to 2025, and that will be launched in the next few weeks. And there are 15 focal areas in the NDS. And based on those pillars, the 2021 budget will focus on around 7 of those pillars. Now, citizens have commented that although the government has claimed success in the implementation of the TSP, in fact, in the BSP, there's a nice graph showing the success that government has done under TSP. Again, it's about trickle-down effects to the ordinary citizen. Your comment?
Yeah, like what I also alluded earlier on, you know, when we're doing community engagement in the hard-to-reach areas, some of the, you know, the visible signs of poverty, deprivation, and lack that we interact with are so deplorable. You wouldn't imagine that even in this day and age, women who want to deliver are made even to buy fuel, to put in an ambulance, and transferred from a clinic to a referral center maybe about 120 kilometers away. And yet we are claiming that the TSP has made successful, you know, achievements within the health sector. If those issues are still there, it means we are far below the targets of then transforming the lives of the general people. Because our focus is, do we see progress happening at the lower level? Driving big cars, you know, going to hotels, going to do all this and that. That's not important, because growth alone is not necessary. But what is important is development. We want to see development happening in the communities. So the NDS now is also bringing on board some of the key aspects that then can come in handy in addressing the inequalities that are prevalent in the economy, because they're starting to pick some of the social issues, human capital issues, the sports issues, the devolution issues, which are very pivotal when we want to address the huge bottlenecks that this economy is struggling to address for it to be of benefit to the general public.
I mean, let's look at some of the areas. Please.
Just to buttress what Leonard is saying, just to add to say, you see, the referent object in terms of development is the individual and the family unit. Anything that we celebrate that is beyond the reach of these establishments is quite, you know, far-fetched.
The 2021 budget will focus on fewer areas. Let me just quickly, before I move on, talk about them. Inclusive growth and macro stability, developing and supporting productive value chains, optimizing value and natural resources, infrastructure, ICT, digital economy, human capital development, as Leonard mentioned, effective institution building and governance, and engagement and re-engagement. Those will be the pillars that the national 2021 budget will be built around. David, one of the issues highlighted in the implementation of the TSP was, and I quote, delays in foreign debt arrears clearance. Implementation of the SMP Staff Monitor program was affected by shocks, and this delays Zimbabwe's access to external official support. Now, Zimbabwe, of course, has been unable to raise international financial support for various reasons, but they have indicated in 2021 they will resume token payments towards debt. Do you think it's critical for Zimbabwe to get its foreign debt and arrears under control? Your comment?
Definitely very critical, Andy, because we are talking of a national debt that will not only affect, you know, us as the current generation. It will have, you know, knock-on effects on the coming generations, the third, fourth, fifth, and it's almost endless. So it's very important that we work on containing, you know, the foreign debt, as well as also, you know, repaying, because I will tell you that it's actually, if left unchecked, you know, this is a national security issue in a way, because it destabilizes sustainable development. It destabilizes a lot of the things that we need as foundational, you know, for our development.
And previously here on the National Purse, we've spoken about how repaying of debt obviously takes away money from critical social services, because you should be spending it on the social services, as Leonard says, for the people, but you're servicing debt, which may have accumulated in our legacy debt even, back in the 1980s even, some of it. You know, Leonard, I want to talk about government's priority to speed up implementation of the Zimbabwe National Industrial Development Policy, which was disrupted by the pandemic. Again, this is about seeking affordable financing for industry and enabling recapitalization of business and support the emergence of new competitive industries. Again, I suppose it's a way of creating jobs, putting people into employment, and by doing that, by increasing production, increasing business activity. But under the current fiscal space, I mean, do you actually think this is achievable? Bearing in mind, of course, that we are constrained from accessing finance lines due to our debt issue.
Yeah.
Your comment.
Right. I think what is important is to put government's primary responsibility and role is to create an enabling environment. And how does government do that? By putting in place policies, legislations, and programs that then facilitate development. So that is what it's supposed to do. Most of the programs that we fail to implement, and we raise the card that is lack of resources. No, but there are so many things that you can do even without resources. Put in place effective, efficient policies, and you start to see things falling within their rightful position. So I think what is important for now is for the government to do its real job. Then ensure that the private sector now becomes the engine for growth and development. Because with a dead private sector, it means these targets of job creations are not going to be met. These targets of value addition, beneficiation are not going to be met. Because most of the industry's infrastructure is also desolate or dilapidated. So it means we need to then resource this whole process. But for us to be able to do that, he talked about the issue of the debt issue, which needs to be resolved amicably. He also, some of the fiscal policy and the monetary policy are not supposed to, they're supposed to complement each other. So if we set, that kind of environment, even investors will start to have confidence and trust within the way our economy is run, and will then go forward.
Now, thankfully, the budget is not yet out. I believe the date should be around the 21st or 24th of November when we will get the official budget statement. So there may possibly be time for citizens to still participate in this debate, David. So I suppose if I can ask you very briefly, because I do have another question to ask you after that, how do you think you would advise citizens to get involved? What should they do? Should they talk to their members of parliament? Or how can they get involved right now, today we're talking about, to get involved in the discussion of what they want to see in the budget?
There are many platforms. Representative democracy that we run in our country, like you hinted, our parliamentary representatives. But you see, we have a problem there because the kind of connection between the representatives and the citizens is problematic, but it can be improved. And if it can be improved, that's one vehicle through which citizens can actually have their voices.
And of course, I will add that about 30-something seats have been recalled, so they don't even be represented.
Yes.
Another discussion for another day.
But again, beyond the 2020 consultations, I think we have an opportunity that seemingly appears far-fetched. But when I looked at the school curriculum, the primary school, the secondary school, I think there is greater emphasis on civic education. And we could actually build around that to increase financial literacy, engagement with government. And then beyond that, of course, my colleague from civil society, they have always been good at, initiating advocacy, lobbying processes leading to policy changes.
I want you to be brief because I do have a final question. But your comments, how do you think citizens today can get involved in this consultation process, which is happening right now?
Yes, I think we are happy that as civil society organizations, that way we are filling that huge gap, one of civic education, or also directly engaging with the citizens as civil society organizations. Then we pick their budget aspirations so that we then draft them into kind of like a compendium of budget aspirations that can be submitted to the Ministry of Finance. We've been working very well with the Ministry of Finance, and they call us to go and present, the people's budget. What are the aspirations of the people? So what we want to do now is to ensure that we then ignite the interest and appetite of the general public to want to participate in this important process that defines their development, their welfare, their peace, and their culture. So I think they need to have that interest ignited so that they want to be part and parcel of this process.
Have NANGO been part of this consultation process? Have you submitted any of your document for this pro-people?
Yeah, initially the ministers wrote to us, and we're in the process now of collecting the views that are emerging from the different stakeholders and segments of the people.
So another way then is for citizens to contact your organization to get their views done.
They can contact us.
Or some of your members.
Exactly.
And then they can bring it forward.
Definitely.
All right, let me get to a final question, because unfortunately, as usual, a very interesting topic. We're coming to the end of the show, and I always say we could carry on talking all day. But let me ask you a simple question. The BSP is a guiding document. It shows what the aspirations of the government should be in the 2021 national budget. So having said that, where do you think this document is taking Zimbabwe?
Right. I think to start with the theme of the budget, building resilience and economic growth post-COVID, because a lot had happened because of COVID. You know, it didn't only destroy the health infrastructure, but all the other facets of the economy. So it means the resilience of the communities, the resilience of companies, the resilience of organizations, even the resilience of the government was also put to question. So what it then informs or tells us is that the budget is going to come in to address that. But after that addressing, it means the economy is supposed also to grow. So what the budget is going to be doing in agriculture, in mining, in manufacturing sector, and also to create jobs. So those are the critical aspects in the direction that I feel
the budget is
taking.
David, let me ask you, I must be honest, until a vaccine comes, I don't like that word post-COVID, because there is no post-COVID, correct? Until we're all cured or we have a vaccine. But anyway, your comment on this. Where is this BSP and hopefully the 2021 national budget going to be taking our country?
So, Andy, I'm a bit apprehensive. Why? Because many a times we have had very brilliant policies, but the commitment in terms of implementation is not just there sometimes. So it is my firm belief and hope that we can begin to make things happen. The paper as a blueprint, as a strategy guiding, consultations is quite brilliant. It takes us on a trajectory, and there are many opportunities. One of it is the currency that we are gaining with the devolution agenda. If it can be clearly defined in terms of what model of devolution, because if I look at it now, it's not very clear. Do we need administrative, political, and financial, independence within the provinces? If need be, let it be clear. And I think devolution is one way to go in terms of ensuring equitable growth, which trickles down to the ordinary citizen. So that's my taking. That's my taking. That
devolution will be a huge growth factor for us.
Yeah, only if it's implemented in
and also as well, as we said and we've been saying throughout the whole program, it also gives the citizens a voice. Yes. I think on that note, we have come to the end of our program this afternoon. We'd like to thank our panelists, Lyndon Mandishara, Executive Director, National Association of Non-Governmental Organizations, NANGO, Dr. David Makwerere, he's an academic, and of course we had invited Sakile Sefalani Ngoma, Executive Director, Women in Politics Support Unit WIPSU, who was unfortunately unable to make our program. Gentlemen, thank you so much for participating in the National Pulse.
Thank you very much, Andy.
You have been watching the National Pulse, our discussion this afternoon, unpacking the 2021 budget strategy paper. This broadcast was brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network, ZTN, and our partners, the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development and ZimCod. Well, that's it for me this afternoon. I'm Andy Hodges. Goodbye, and you all be safe.